Did you know that Sylvester Stallone was brought to court by the same man the Rocky franchise was based on? And can you guess which famous billionaire Tony Stark is inspired by? These are 10 characters you didn't know were based on real people. Ronald Weasley is one of Harry Potter's best friends. Without Ron's great sense of humor and loyalty, Harry would be so lost.
Anything off the trolley, dears?
No thanks. I'm all set.
But we may not have even had Harry Potter if it weren't for the person Ron was based on. J.K. Rowling based Ron off her childhood friend, Sean Harris, who especially meant a lot to her because he was the first person with whom I really discussed my serious ambition to be a writer, and he was the only person who thought I was bound to be a success at it. Certain real-life details, like Sean's Ford Anglia, also made it into the books. Oh, and for those of you who were wondering, Hermione is inspired by a younger version of Rowling herself, while Harry is based on J.K. Rowling's childhood friend and neighbor Ian Potter, a boy who actually shares the same last name as Harry. Although using childhood friends as her models worked in Rowling's case, what can you do when you're trying to write a personality that's a little, well, bigger? That's right, turn to celebrities. How can you put Tony Stark into words?
Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist.
Thank you, Tony. When Stan Lee and his team first created Iron Man for the comics, there was only one man they were thinking of: American billionaire Howard Hughes. Stan described him as one of the most colorful men of our time. But when it came time for Tony to be reinvented for the MCU, they had someone a little more modern in mind. The writers modeled their version off of Elon Musk. In fact, Robert Downey Jr. even sat down to talk with Musk because he felt this is the guy who can give us some insight into what it'd really be like to be Tony Stark. The inspiration runs so deep that Musk even received a cameo in Iron Man 2.
Mr. Musk, how are you?
Congratulations on the promotion.
But celebrities aren't the only ones who can inspire characters larger than life. Do you know the code name for the secret agent James Bond was based off of? We'll give you a hint. He wasn't 007. And whether or not he liked his martinis shaken or stirred is, well, still up for debate. Instead, meet Forrest Yo Thomas, codename White Rabbit, a secret agent for the British forces during World War II, who served around the same time Ian Fleming got the idea to write a spy novel. There's also paperwork to connect the two of them, and plenty of Yo Thomas's real-life experiences resemble something out of a Bond movie. So, even though Fleming claimed there were many men who inspired 007, this guy was as close to being a real-life Bond as you should be to subscribing by now. Go on, click it. Anyway, there was this one time when Yo Thomas found himself trapped on a train, surrounded by enemies in a moment that comes straight out of From Russia with Love, and the writers for Casino Royale even took a bit of the inspiration from Yo Thomas's grueling capture by the Gestapo for a few scenes. And speaking of characters who had to work undercover, have you ever had one of those teachers you'll just never forget? That was John Nettleship for J.K. Rowling. He was a chemistry teacher who taught her during her time at secondary school, and with his long hair, short temper, and gloomy laboratory, he became the perfect inspiration for Severus Snape when it came time for her to write the Harry Potter books. Apparently, his own students were the first to point out the similarities to poor John, and as he put it, I was horrified when I first found out. I knew I was a strict teacher, but I didn't think I was that bad. As time went on, however, John would eventually come around to the idea, cementing himself even further into the world of Harry Potter by writing books and giving talks on the way that the local area had inspired Rowling's work. At least it seems that everyone remained on friendly terms in this case. It might be a good idea to get someone's permission before you go telling their life story. Chuck Wepner was a New Jersey-born boxer who fought under the moniker of the Bayonne Bleeder. He came from a tough background and was considered a bit of an unknown figure in 1975 when he fought boxing legend Muhammad Ali. Wepner lost, but he still managed to withstand 15 brutal rounds and even knocked Ali out at one point. Now, all of this may be starting to sound familiar to you at this point. A young Sylvester Stallone watched this 1975 fight on TV and shortly thereafter began work on his script for the movie Rocky, using Wepner as his inspiration. When Wepner eventually saw the film, he said, "That's my life up on that screen. He took my life and made a movie of it." Wepner eventually filed a $15 million lawsuit against Stallone in 2003, which was settled out of court. At least Chuck has to be happier with the way that he was able to inspire the imagination than our next guy here. you kinda have to feel bad for the guy that this character was based on. You probably know Jabba the Hutt as the big, gross slug guy from Star Wars who took Princess Leia captive and had Han Solo encased in carbonite, but what you may not know is that George Lucas had a bit of a tendency to take inspiration from his own childhood when he was designing his creatures. And when it came to putting together Jabba the Hutt, he asked his production team to make sure that he was alien and grotesque, like the actor Sidney Greenstreet. This helped the design team get their creative ideas going, and at one point, they'd even come up with the idea of having Jabba the Hutt wear a fez hat, exactly like the one Greenstreet wore in Casablanca. It's funny how the costume an actor wears in one movie can inspire a whole other character in that way. Sometimes, inspiration can come from the strangest of places. When actress Arlene Sorkin handed her college buddy Paul Dini a tape of herself as a clown from Days of Our Lives, she probably just expected him to laugh at it. But seeing as Paul was writing for Batman, the animated series at the time, this tape actually gave him an idea. He'd already been trying to work out an idea for a female sidekick to the Joker, and when he saw this,
Let's do what they do on the castle down the block. We'll throw the peasants in the moat and watch them drown.
everything just sort of fell into place. Arlene even got to provide the voice for Harley, and she didn't put a whole lot of time into preparation. That's right, the high nasal Brooklyn-ish cadence that everyone's been copying as the original Harley voice is really just Arlene Sorkin's natural speaking voice.
Oh, look! Boss fight!
Being turned into a clown may not seem like the most flattering portrayal, but at least it's better than our next one. He's obsessed with getting pictures of Spider-Man and holds a lot of control over public opinion. But are we talking about J. Jonah Jameson or Stan Lee?
Spider-Man with his hand in a cookie jar. Whoever brings me that photo gets a job.
You probably don't think of Marvel's lovable old figurehead when you look at the cranky editor-in-chief at the Daily Bugle, even if there are a few slight similarities, like, say, their age and their mustache. But all that's just surface level, right? Well, as it turns out, when Stan Lee was asked if he'd based Jameson's appearance on himself, he said, "You caught me, I really did." In fact, when Stan created Jameson, he just thought to himself, if I were a grumpy, irritable man, which I am sometimes, how would I act? And that was it. We're just hoping that Stan was an easier boss to work for than Jameson.
What, are you looking for a raise? Get out.
And hey, we love that Stan didn't take himself too seriously, kinda like our next entry on this list. It's hard to pin down the right inspiration for a sea witch. You can't just base the character on a family member, as in our next entry. It has to be the right person. Writer Howard Ashman was brought on to work on The Little Mermaid during a time when they were still struggling to pin down a look for Ursula. Nothing seemed right. That is, until Ashman suggested that they base their design on the drag performer, Divine. You see, Ashman was a huge fan of Divine, and as a fellow gay man from Baltimore, he felt he could understand both his way of seeing the world and his sense of humor. You can see Divine in Ursula's exaggerated makeup, cheek mole, and white mohawk, but the similarities don't end there. Ashman continued to write Ursula with Divine's sense of humor, and he even coached Pat Carroll to sing with Divine's distinctive growl. How would you feel growing up alongside your famous fictional counterpart? Christopher Robin became a world-famous name for his adventures through the 100-Acre Wood, alongside the Winnie the Pooh and Friends, written by author A.A. Milne. Milne had actually based Christopher Robin on his own son, who was also named Christopher Robin. Winnie the Pooh was based on a friendly black bear at the London Zoo that Christopher loved so much he eventually named his teddy bear after him. Christopher's other stuffed animals inspired other characters like Tigger and Piglet. At first, Christopher loved these stories because they made him feel grand and important. It wasn't until he began to face bullying at boarding school that he began to develop a love-hate relationship with his fictional namesake that has continued to this day. Christopher found that he began to dislike his father's stories more and more as he grew older, but didn't know if his father was ever aware of this. You may not know these people's names, but we'll certainly never forget their stories. Were you most surprised to find out was based on someone real? And are there any other examples we might have missed? We love a good story here, so make sure to tell us down in the comment section.